Ever wondered what happens when three spoiled rich kids lose everything and are forced to live like mere mortals? Well, buckle up, because in the 2021 comedy, Spoiled Brats, three entitled siblings get a crash course in reality, and it's a wild ride. Hey everyone, welcome back to Movie Recaps Hub podcast. I'm Doolin, and today we're diving into Spoiled Brats, a hilarious story about a millionaire father who finally says enough is enough to his three spoiled children. If you love a good family comedy with a healthy dose of comeuppance, stick around. And as always, at the end, I'll remind you to like, comment, and subscribe. So let's get into it. Okay, picture this. Francis Bartek is a widower and self-made millionaire of Polish descent. He started from nothing in France and built a construction empire. Now he lives in Monaco. The catch? His three adult kids, Philippe, Alexandre, and Stella, have never lifted a finger to work. They rely entirely on dad's paycheck, and boy, do they abuse it. Alexandre is skipping all his classes to sleep with every woman he meets. No age limit. Stella spends her days shopping for designer clothes and accessories. Philippe comes up with ridiculous business ideas and abandons any real work in favor of partying. They're rude to the servants, disrespect the workers. Basically, they act like they're royalty. And Francis? Ever since his wife passed away 15 years ago, he just can't seem to discipline them. He loves his kids, but he's spread way too thin between running his empire and grieving. Ferrucio, Francis's business associate and close friend, keeps telling him, at some point, you've got to be stricter. But Francis has never been able to follow through. One morning, Philippe storms into Francis's lavish office with yet another harebrained scheme, hiring people to break in shoes before customers buy them. I mean, break in your shoes so they'll be comfy on day one? Francis, being a pushover, says he'll think about it. Ferrucio immediately facepalms and whispers in Francis's ear, "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. You have to stop indulging them." Philippe leaves, and Ferrucio basically scolds Francis for coasting on the excuse that their mother is gone. They've been grown-ups for years now, but can Francis really change his behavior? Let's find out. Cut to the Bartek mansion. It's Stella's birthday party. Of course, it's over the top. Her lazy Argentine boyfriend, Juan Carlos, is there holding court, telling endless stories about Argentina and gushing that he loves Stella more than life itself. But here's the thing. He won't bring her juice, and she's pissed. So she storms into the kitchen, starts berating the catering staff, and that's when she bumps into Mateus, an old acquaintance who's catering the party. He teases her, saying the only reason she's happy to see him is that he's working for her all night. Ouch. Meanwhile, Francis is holed up in his home office, talking to a portrait of his late wife. He's wondering where he went wrong, and Marguerite, his longtime housekeeper, tells him he's depressed. Offended, Francis stomps out when he hears ruckus in the ballroom. He finds Juan Carlos trying to open a vintage champagne bottle with a golf ball, predictably failing, and then blaming the waiter for moving the bottle. Once Juan Carlos and Stella realize Dad is watching, they demand a private talk. Francis takes them into his office, casually cleaning his shotgun as he listens. Juan Carlos announces he wants to marry Stella. Francis's response is priceless. He bluntly says, "I don't approve. You're just marrying my money, not your own fortune in Argentina." Stella explodes, reminding Francis he's never been there for her. She's not asking permission. She's just giving a heads up. The couple storms out to rejoin the party. Stella announces their engagement to everyone, and the best friend she invited is fuming. Just then, Francis's phone rings. Ferrucio reports that Philippe never delivered that package. Instead, he went to a party and posted video proof all over social media. Francis's face drops. He fires off a text to his kids, but he's already had enough. Suddenly, the front door bursts open. Alexandra's school principal shows up, blazing mad. Not only is Alexandra skipping class, but the principal's been told Alexandra is sleeping with his wife. And it gets worse, with the principal's 2 daughters. Alexandra appears on the staircase with both of the principal's daughters at his side, smirking. The principal chases Alexandra all through the mansion, fists swinging. Watching this chaos is the final straw for Francis. He clutches his chest, falls to the floor, and has a massive heart attack. Francis awakens in a crisp hospital room to find Ferrucio standing watch. One by one, the kids shuffle in, bickering loudly over who forgot to pick up this or that. And Francis's heart monitor spikes from stress. Ferrucio finally chases them all out, leaving Francis alone. He turns to Ferrucio and asks, "Do you think my wife would be proud of them?" Cue the heavy silence. 2 months later, the 3 siblings return to the Bartek mansion. Credit cards blocked, phones disconnected, and no Wi-Fi. A squad of policemen surrounds the house with a search warrant. Panic sets in. Suddenly, Francis bursts out with a shotgun in hand, herding his kids to the street. He flags down a random driver at gunpoint, demands a ride, and they peel out. A moment later, Ferrucio pulls up, slips money to the driver, and the Barteks drive off in a muddy rental car. On the ride to Marseille, Francis confesses the truth. The company's been drained, accounts frozen, and everyone's looking for fraud. Ferrucio is the prime suspect. Francis confiscates their phones, throws them onto the... Arriving in Marseille, the siblings freak out. They've never been around ordinary people. No fancy cars, no servants, just a tiny rundown house. Over a dinner of fried bread, Francis lays it out. They're on their own now. He tells them to find jobs. He'll stay behind to fix up the house and dodge the police. Morning in Marseille is brutal. The water is brown. There's no door on the bathroom, so Stella spritzes perfume to hide the smell. Meanwhile, Philippe squats and has to wipe himself with, well, just air. Alexandra heads to a construction site. He tries to steal lunch from the workers, gets kicked off the site, and is told to come back if he actually wants a job. Stella borrows a stranger's phone on the street, ignoring Francis's strict no phone calls order, and calls Juan Carlos, eating up all the guy's minutes. Philippe visits a rich friend to ask for startup cash. His friend finally confesses, "Your ideas are dumb. I was just humoring you so I could talk about your party stories." Betrayed, Philippe stomps off. Hours later, Alexandre and Philippe drift home empty-handed. Stella, triumphant, shows up with designer shopping bags. She sold Philippe's watch to buy clothes instead of groceries. Classic. Philippe, livid, dumps soap all over her haul. They start fighting when, ding dong, Marguerite arrives with towels, clothes, and some secret savings. Francis politely refuses the money, but asks her to keep their situation under wraps. Matthias, who Stella called earlier, offers Stella a restaurant interview that very afternoon. Next day, Stella shows up at the restaurant. She's hired on a trial basis, but nearly collapses balancing trays. She drops plates, mixes up orders, and learns the hard way how demanding tables can be. By the end of her shift, she's washing dishes, gutting fish, still under her breath, but staying the course. Meanwhile, back at the house, Philippe goes to a job agency. The clerk goes pale, hearing Philippe's resume. 0 experience, 0 qualifications. And his demand for a senior management position with a fancy salary and a company car paid off the books, since he's wanted by the police. The clerk eventually tags him as a bike taxi driver. Philippe's heavy frame makes him a walking obstacle on a bicycle. Rival driver Malik steals all his fares. Inside the house, Ferrucio visits Francis with wine and lobster. Francis resists, doesn't want to eat lavishly while the kids are working. Eventually, he caves and digs in. Ferrucio wonders, are you fixing up this house to really teach them a lesson, or just to prove a point? At dusk, Francis hears noise upstairs, grabs his shotgun, and finds Alexandra sleeping in every room. Instead of job hunting, Alexandra built a hammock out of stray ropes and dozed off. When he spots a stray lobster shell on the table, he's shocked. Francis scrambles to say, "I caught that lobster myself." Alexandra, clueless, says, "Nature always provides," and goes back to sleep. That evening, Philippe and Stella return with actual wages. Francis divides the small pile of cash, food money versus house repairs. When he learns Alexandra's only accomplishment was constructing a hammock, Philippe and Stella refuse to share dinner with him. Angry and ashamed, Alexandra wanders off to gather acorns, apples, and wild berries, things that promptly make him sick after dinner. Next morning at dawn, Francis wakes the kids at 6 a.m. Alexandra is told, "You fix this house or you don't eat." He grumbles, "Why not just sell it since we never used it?" Francis insists it has sentimental value. At the restaurant, Stella is already facing rude customers and mix-ups. One jerk complains his order is missing an ingredient. She storms back to the kitchen, ready to quit. Matthias corners her and says, "Look, that guy treats waiters like crap. Remember how you used to treat servers? Don't be shocked." Humbled, Stella works extra, mopping the floor, washing dishes, and never complaining again. Philippe finally has enough of Malik stealing fares. He confronts him and sparks fly. They almost fistfight, until they bond over a shared love of collectible trainers. They decide to team up. Philippe helps promote Malik's shoe collection in exchange for a cut of sales. Suddenly, Philippe's entrepreneurial brain is fired up, for a good reason this time. Later, Francis checks on Alexandra, who just fixed the plumbing like a pro. Francis asks, "How on earth did you learn plumbing?" Alexandra grins. "In high school, we rerouted the waste pipe into the principal's shower. I spent 2 months on plumbing tutorials to fix that mess." Francis actually smiles with pride. Meanwhile, in Monaco, Juan Carlos is sneaking around with Stella's best friend. She tells him rumors that the Barteks lost their fortune and that Ferrucio is behind it all. Juan Carlos remembers seeing Ferrucio at the country club, so he starts putting pieces together and decides to investigate. Back in Marseille, around the dinner table, Francis has the big talk. He admits he's been an absent father because it was too painful to suddenly be both parents after mom got sick. He reveals he hid her illness from them to protect them. The kids push back. Stella reminds him she battled anorexia for a year. She lost 10 kilos throwing up every day. Francis never noticed. Alexandre says he spent a night in jail for possession. Yet Francis was off on another business trip and never visited. Philippe says when he was in the hospital for peritonitis, Dad was in Japan and didn't cancel his trip to see him. The siblings point out Mom would have flown across the world. Francis, reeling from guilt, storms out. Alone, Ferrucio drops by, and says, "Stop pretending, you have to talk to them." But Francis isn't ready yet. Suddenly, plot twist. Juan Carlos shows up at the Marseille house. He reveals he sold all his properties in Argentina to pay the Bartek debts. Why? Because he loves Stella, or so he says. Francis, wanting to keep up appearances because he doesn't want his kids to find out he faked the fraud, plays along, pretending to be relieved. He agrees to return to Monaco. On the drive home, Juan Carlos brags, "Now Stella and I can marry." Stella gives him a half-hearted kiss. Something's off. Next day in Monaco, Francis confesses to Marguerite that he's terrified Stella will marry a gold digger. Marguerite tells him, "You need to come clean with your kids." Francis calls Ferrucio, and they agree. Time to fess up. But Juan Carlos catches wind of this plan. He spirits Stella off to City Hall to elope. She's hesitant, but Juan Carlos promises a big celebration later. At City Hall, Francis storms in with Philippe and Alexandre. The deputy mayor who's presiding is mute, so the ceremony drags on painfully. Just when Juan Carlos recites his "I do," Stella discovers his real name is Kevin Lepoutre, and that his father is not a refugee. He offers excuses, but by the time he finishes, Francis bursts into the chamber. "You never sold anything in Argentina. It was a sham. I invented the whole fraud to teach you kids a lesson. The cops at our house? Paid actors. The credit card blocks? My doing." Stella slaps Juan Carlos Kevin across the face. She storms out with Philippe and Alexandre. They leave Dad standing alone in the mayor's office, speechless, as Juan Carlos is humiliated and tossed out. Cut to 9 months later. Francis hasn't heard a peep from his kids, except for unopened monthly checks they send from Marseille. He stacks them in a glass bowl on his desk. One afternoon, after a business meeting, Ferrucio accidentally takes a wrong turn and ends up in front of Francis's old Marseille home. In the trunk are flowers for Stella's birthday. Inside, the siblings are thriving. Philippe and Malik run a successful trainer-selling operation. Alexandre is a full-time plumber, always busy with calls. Stella and Matthias are opening their own restaurant, glowing with pride. Francis walks up to the door. The mood is icy. He quietly hands flowers to Stella and blurts out a heartfelt apology. Before he can say more, he turns to leave. The siblings exchange glances. They feel a spark of longing for the father they once loved. Finally, they call him back. He steps inside, and for the first time in a long while, the Bartek family sits together, laughing and celebrating Stella's birthday. And there you have it, the full scoop on Spoiled Brats. 3 entitled kids, a dad who fakes a fraud scandal, and a crash course in humility that ultimately ends in a bittersweet reunion. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment below with your favorite moment. And of course, subscribe for more movie recaps and podcast-style breakdowns. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time on Movie Recaps Hub Podcast.